Who will be victorious?
Welcome back to another Star Mini Gaming YouTube video, and once again we are in the world of the Age of Sigmar, and this video is a bit of a review and a discussion of the new Realm Gate Wars audio drama series that GW is putting out in their Black Library. Warning, there will be spoilers in this, obviously, as I discuss the plot points some, and what I liked and disliked about it, and really maybe if you haven't bought it and you've thought about it, maybe it helps you to decide whether or not this is something for you. So the first one, we're going to break it down by the 2 episodes that are currently out at the time of this video. There will be 4. Is the Prisoner of the Black Sun. And right out of the gate, we get one thing that I really enjoyed and was looking forward to in this was the Nagash introduction. And it's told, it's kind of like, an internal monologue that Nagash is having. And it's really cool because not only does it kind of give you, obviously some of the thought processes that Nagash is going through, but you finally get to hear his voice, which was pretty neat. Obviously, they don't just have the voice actor do it. Whenever you listen to it, they've obviously computer enhanced the voice some. But the end result, I really liked. I thought it was pretty cool. It's for myself, it was kind of in the same league as like a Darth Vader, in terms of like the voice seems to really fit the character. It's powerful. It's basically along the lines of what I would have imagined the voice of someone like Nagash to be. So right out of the gates, we get that, which is a big treat for myself. And before I go any further, I just want to specify, these are not your typical audiobooks. It does tell the story in the same way, but GW really kind of pulled out all the stops for this. This is kind of like an old radio production from obviously back before my time, where you have the background music, the narrator, and then different voices for all the voice actors and sound effects that are pretty good, kind of contributing to it also, whenever there's a battle being described, and if there's a sound of axes against shields or whatever is being described by the narrator, then you'll hear these sound effects in the background. That it's pretty well done, so it just kind of adds the overall feeling of it, and that's something else I enjoyed about it. Now back into what story-wise kind of happens. We're immediately introduced after the prologue to Lord Celestant Tarsus the Bullheart. So not only do we immediately at the beginning get to kind of meet Tarsus the character beyond just the kind of big clunky metal armored basically space marine that he is, but we get to kind of learn a little bit about the culture of the Sigmarites, with the kind of nicknames and all that they give to each other based upon their actions in battle. So his entire regiment takes on his name. The Bullhearts is what they're called because of him. And they're in the realm of death, looking for a gate into the underworld to have a meeting with Nagash. Sigmar has sent them there to try to rekindle that old alliance, despite the fact that Nagash has betrayed him in the past. And they skirmish along the way with some Khorne forces, and Tarsus recalls falling in battle before and being reborn in the heavenly realm, once again in his armor reforged. And it's kind of neat because, to the best of my knowledge, this is the first time that we actually get to see that process kind of explained. So we get to kind of see it through the character's eyes of what happens and what the experience is like for him, and it's pretty interesting. I'd wondered how that really worked. So anyways, they continue on in the realm of death after this little brief flashback, and they arrive at this temple that they're not quite sure what it was for, and they find what appears to be a corpse hanging on the inside by his wrists with spikes impaled through them. And so they approach to remove the body because they're like, they shouldn't leave the body there just kind of to be disgraced by these Khorne warriors, and they realize that not only is the person not dead, but it is in fact a vampire. And you get a kind of a glimpse into Tarsus's pre-Stormcast life, where he makes the comment that, and he's not even quite sure why he says it, that you can't trust any vampires or undead, and so it's kind of cool. It's the first time, at least again in this story, that we get to see a bit of the Stormcast lives before they were Stormcast. He can't recall any of his life beforehand. That's one thing that's established repeatedly, not just in this story, but in other ones, is that the Stormcast may have glimpses of their past life where little thoughts or experiences will kind of pop up, but they can't really ever remember any really anything of significance of their past lives before they were reforged by Sigmar into the Stormcast. So the Khorne forces arrive here shortly after they discover that this is in fact a vampire, and of course there is an epic battle that commences between the two sides. And as you probably guessed, basically at one point in the battle, Tarsus is faced with the impossible choice. Does he allow himself and his Stormcast to die, or does he free this vampire with the chance that this could turn the tide, which he does. And the vampire, his mount, which is a Dread Abyssal, was being held captive by the Khorne forces, and he kind of frees it with his magic and rides it into battle alongside the Stormcast and turns the tide in their favor by summoning a bunch of skeletons and other undead, and they're able to destroy the Khorne forces. And the vampire reveals that he is in fact my least favorite character of the entire Warhammer universe, Manfred von Karstein, and he swears to help Tarsus in his journey to find Nagash in return for Tarsus having freed him and saved him from the Khorne warriors who would repeatedly leave and return to torture him and let his body, with its supernatural healing abilities, kind of heal up before they came back for another round of torture. And that is the conclusion of part one. I know I summed it up really quickly. Obviously there's a lot more to it, but because it is a little bit over an hour. But that's just kind of some of the highlight points. So now we reach part two of the story, which is the Sands of Blood. And again, we begin with another Nagash intro. And I really enjoyed this one because of the first one. And if you kind of place them side by side, you see how kind of the evolution of what's going on for Nagash and the Realm of Death. In the first one, he's very arrogant, and he's like, I am a god, I am the strongest. It's like, you dare to enter my realm where everything is me and I am everything. And in the second one, Nagash begins to sound desperate. You begin to see that he's weakening, and that the war against the ruinous powers has definitely taken his power down a notch, and that he's begun to realize that he can't do this on his own. And so Tarsus and Manfred are continuing on their journey, and they encounter a group of pilgrims that are traveling across these red sands. And so, knowing that there are lots of other Khorne forces in the area, Tarsus and his Stormcast decide that they're going to escort these pilgrims as they continue looking for their gates down into the underworld, because it is their duty. Because they are in essence the good guys, right? And so, as much as Manfred doesn't want to, he agrees to tag along, and so they escort these pilgrims towards the temple that they're heading to. And on the way there, Manfred reveals to the Stormcast that the reason that these sands are red is they're actually the blood of Nagash's enemies that he basically conquered and wiped out when he came and conquered and fully united under himself the Realm of Death, and that these lands are haunted. And so there's a storm that's gradually approaching, and so the Stormcast and their charges have to hurry towards this temple, because in the storm is basically the ghosts and the spirits of the fallen warriors that Nagash has wiped out, and they're vengeful, like you would imagine. And so they barely make it there as the storm begins to hit. But the Chaos forces are attacked by these things, which buys them enough time to kind of get established into this temple. And whenever they arrive in this temple, they meet what appears to be a group of 77 monks. But in fact, they quickly discover these are vampires. And the pilgrims basically offer them each their wrists and allow the vampires to feed a little bit to continue to survive. And they say that in the past, these vampires had protected them, and now, to repay them, they come and they help protect the vampires who no longer are willing to fight. And we find out later why, but that seems strange to Tarsus because obviously Manfred is such a capable fighter and has been such a great help to them in battle against the Khorne forces that he doesn't understand why this is. And Manfred speaks with them and kind of figures out what they are and looks down on them. But the story doesn't reveal to you yet why that is. But, of course, as with any good Warhammer story, war is in the name, the Chaos forces arrive and they're desperate because they want to get into this temple to get away from the storm because obviously it's ravaging their forces. And so they attack with reckless abandon because this is their very survival that they're fighting for. And so Tarsus and his Stormcasts and Manfred basically set up their defenses and fight them, and eventually the Khorne forces do manage to get inside the temple. And Tarsus and Manfred and a few other Stormcasts are fighting before all these 77 vampires that, are basically kneeled down on the ground. They don't want to fight. And Tarsus slays a couple Khorne warriors and they fall at his feet. And then he sees these vampires come over and start feeding off them because basically the battle and the bloodshed has become too much. They've basically been driven to the point they're like, I can't resist anymore, I'm going to come feed. And when they do, the amount of blood basically drives them mad. And they turn into, I believe it's pronounced Vargulfs. If you look them up on the GW website, they're basically these big old bat creatures, and all the vampires transform into that. And they just start attacking both sides. They go crazy. They basically become just animals. They attack Stormcast and Pilgrims and Khorne forces alike. They just are wrecking everything. And finally, Manfred basically steps up and says, I'm Manfred. I will not be defeated by you inferior beasts. Get out of here. And they leave. Basically, the Vargulfs decide that it's not worth the effort to try to kill these Stormcasts and their vampire ally, that it's too much effort for their prey. So they go out into the wastes, into the red sands, to hunt forces of Khorne that are nearby, which they deem are easier prey. And so at the end, Manfred and the Stormcast depart from the temple to continue looking for their for the portal into the into the underworld to have a talk with Nagash. And Manfred kind of reiterates that they're allies for now, but they probably won't always be. So we kind of come to the end of it, into the summary of the second one, and I wanted to briefly talk about kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly, because that's always fun, right? With these two audio dramas that are so far out and the two more yet to come that I will review once they're out. And let's start with the good, and I feel like there's the most of the things are pretty good with this, right? The good is there's obviously a lot of effort on GW's part put into these. I mean, the music is good. It's not overwhelming. It's kind of, a nice gentle background element of it. Then you also have, all the different voice actors, like I mentioned before. You have the sound effects. You have the narrators. You have a lot of effort put into this. Aside from having the visual, there's not really anything that you're left without. The story, I felt like it's pretty good. It's obviously not super in depth, I mean, again, the episodes are only about an hour long, a little bit over, but hour to an hour 15 long, roughly. And the story, so the story's pretty short and sweet, but I feel like it's a pretty good story that they're developing. It's nice because they really begin to explain and kind of reveal what the realm of death is like. Because up until this point, as far as I know, we haven't really had a picture of it. We've had, in the Age of Sigmar, kind of described that there are the 9 realms, but we haven't really gotten to see what each of them are like, and so they've largely been a mystery. And this story has begun to reveal what the realm of death is like enough to where even if we don't have all the information, we can kind of begin to imagine and put together the pieces of the puzzle. It's kind of neat that the realm of death is like in 2 parts. You have basically the overworld and then the underworld where Nagash actually is. Another good thing is, with each of the episodes being roughly an hour long, they're not an overly large commitment to where you kind of like would lose track of them if you weren't able to listen to them all in one sitting. And with them being about an hour long, they're pretty good for things like longer commutes. And the list of characters isn't too long. Now there are always like a few secondary characters that are kind of mentioned in each of the episodes, and they kind of star in those episodes. And they're not mentioned as much necessarily in the later ones. But the main characters, there's only about 2 or 3 that are like really consistently popping up throughout both of the episodes. So it's not too hard to keep track of who's who and who's doing what. And then we come to the bad. And, the bad is that, like most things GW, they're a bit pricey. The first one is a little over $7, and the second one is right about $15. And for about 2 hours of content, $22 is a bit pricey, right? So you're paying about $11 an hour for content. I'm not saying it's the end of the world, but it's a bit more than I think is really justifiable in terms of it being like fair. Whenever you compare it to renting or buying a movie, you can buy digital copies of movies that have just come out for $15. So for $4 more, you can get a movie that is longer and obviously has had even more put into it than these. So the price is a bit of an issue in my opinion. There are 2 more that are coming out, and based upon the price for the like kind of season pack that you can buy to get access to all of them, that's at a bit of a discount. The next 2 may be even more expensive than the second one. I don't know yet because they're not out, but I'm just speculating that they may be a little bit more pricey, which if they're not any longer, would just be a bit more of a disappointment, to be honest. And really, they don't compare too well even to GW's other audio products in terms of Age of Sigmar in their value. For example, I just bought Gal Miraz, the Hunt for Gal Miraz, or whatever that one is. And that's about 8.5 to 9 hours worth of content for $50. So whenever you figure $11 an hour for these, which obviously they are a bit more than just an audiobook, versus about about $5 to $6 an hour for the regular audiobooks, it just even when compared to their own products, the value doesn't seem to really be there in as much as you'd like. That being said, I'm not trying to say don't buy them. I'm just saying that's, in my opinion, that's the one real bad thing about them is just like all other GW things, they're pricey. And then the ugly, really short and sweet, Manfred's back. I hate Manfred. I hate him from the end times. He basically caused the entire world to be destroyed over petty feelings. Had his feelings hurt. Didn't like his place in Nagash's forces. Wanted to betray Nagash, but Nagash got him first. And over that, he decided, you know what? I'm going to, instead of just kind of going off and living a more quiet existence than I would like, I'm just going to doom the whole world. Really hate that guy. And with the way the GW kind of writes his character in this story, I feel like GW really likes the character, and we're going to be seeing a lot more of him, which is again a disappointment for me because of how much I despise the character. So I guess, kind of in conclusion, overall summary, there's definitely, in my opinion, a lot more good than bad with this. Again, the product's a bit pricey, but it's like any other book or really movie or anything else. It's going to have some replayability. Obviously, not necessarily right away, but it's something that I'll definitely come back and revisit. So the value will be a little bit better over time because, $11 an hour right now, in terms of listening, will kind of be broken down if I repeat it. Still a bit pricey, but it's an overall good quality product that has been an enjoyable story so far, in spite of Manfred, and something I would encourage if you don't mind paying a little bit more and you really want to kind of learn about the story of the Age of Sigmar as it unfolds and kind of evolves, then right now is a good time to kind of get in because there's not a whole lot of books that have come out yet, not necessarily like the Warhammer 40k or classic Warhammer universes where you're looking at a few hundred books perhaps in each. So stay tuned for parts 3 and 4 that will be reviewed whenever they come out. And until next time, happy gaming.